Thanks for tuning in to a special roundtable edition of the Coast to Coast podcast. We've talked about a couple of different main topics that we want to discuss with you guys this summer. Some of them we're revisiting from the past. They're kind of reoccurring topics, and this would be one of those. That's divisions and divisional structure. So D1 versus D2, why teams fall into a certain division, the current structure, and if it's the right one for college roller hockey, and possibly throwing out some alternatives and seeing where everybody stands on it, and trying to get, ultimately to a position where everybody feels comfortable about the structure of the league and has a good game plan for their programs moving forward. So real quick, I'm going to go around and throw out all the names of everybody that we've got here. We're going to do introductions in a second. But I just want to go around to introduce our panel quickly. We have Jaron Malafa, who's the head coach of Western Michigan's D2 team. Dan Leonard, the head coach of Rhode Island's D1 team. Andrew Kramer, he is the head of PR for the University of Missouri's Roller Hockey Club. Nick Boyarski, who is a coach for Arizona State University's D1 and D3 teams. And then I'll be joined shortly by Ian Prescott, who's a co-host of NCRHA Coast to Coast. He's also coached in the past the University of Arizona, Northeastern University, and Cortland, including taking two of those teams to national championship games. So real briefly, we were supposed to have Bill Bork from the ECRHA, and also he's one of the executive board members of the NCRHA, join us and talk about some of the things that the league has discussed over the years. He talked to us on Twitter and mentioned that he and the league go back and forth on this every single year. He said he's got about 20 pages of written documents, talking about the different structures, the different possibilities, and why they have, stuck with the current format and the way that they have. But I'm going to play a quick audio clip from Rob Coggin. He is the director of the NCRHA, and this is him a couple of years ago talking about the way that the divisions are structured, and this can kind of give you an idea of what the league's take is on it.
What we're looking for teams to get into D1 from that D2 level. Well, the real issue between D1 and D2 is organization and stability, sustainability, if you will. What we really don't want to have happen, and I could cite some examples of this from the past, but our teams at the D1 level that either, they come and then they, 2 or 3 years later, they're completely off the map. They're not even part of the league anymore. That have just come in based solely on talent and said we want to play D1. That's great, but then there's no work done behind the scenes to make sure that they're going to be around for the long haul. So realistically, our D2 programs that we're moving up are the ones that we're going to be interested in seeing move up, I should say, are the ones that have some type of foundation laid. They've got good rapport built with their schools, with their club sports departments. They are hopefully on their way to getting some funding if there's a possibility from their school. They've got a succession plan. The current leadership knows who's going to be taking on that leadership behind them. Hopefully, their numbers are beginning to develop to the point where they're going to have things like B teams. Those are, and those are the things that we call, the term we like to use are hallmarks of a Division I program. And so when we look at those divisional applications at the beginning of the year, actually right in this time frame, going into our league meetings, what we're doing is we're looking for those hallmarks. What do you have in your program that shows that you have the makings of a Division I program?
Okay, so that was from Rob Coggin, an interview with Rob just a couple of years ago, but not much has changed in terms of the league's approach to this. So that's kind of the league's position, and now we're going to go around and introduce everybody and kind of get your initial thoughts. We're going to start with Andrew Kramer. He is the PR head for University of Missouri's Roller Hockey Club. They have 2 teams that compete in the Great Plains region, which is definitely known as the Lindenwood region, if you will. Also home to some other strong competition, including Bethel and Umsel. Andrew, what are your thoughts when you hear that, and kind of your thoughts on this whole divisional debate?
Well, you know, I play for the D3 team myself, and I'm not really sure about next year. Uh, but playing at nationals and D3 and whatnot, and experiencing, having to play Lindenwood multiple times, both teams, black and gold, and Bethel so much. Um, they're just hard, well coached teams, and we have quite difficulty playing against them. We have a lot of fun, and they're heated games. I really enjoy playing against them. But I do think, like, in my region, especially the Great Plains region, I think that D2 and D3 are kind of, I guess they're not like the teams in those respective divisions aren't in the correct divisions in my point of view. There's teams in D2, and I know the rules, like how certain universities, if they have two teams, the second one has to be in D3. But I believe, if a D3 team is better than a D2 team, they should move up, And I think a lot of the Lindenwood teams should move up to D3, and a lot of the D2 teams should move down to D3. So that's just my 2 cents there.
Okay, and that's good to add that input, and that's similar to, say, how the ACHA runs the club ice hockey essentially.
Yeah.
So that's good to add in. Let's go to Jaron. Jaron, what are you thinking?
I mean, the way the whole system is set up, it's conducive for building farm teams and farm clubs and really building a large organization. I think maybe the discrepancy that people are having is that D3 is technically lower than D2. Maybe a simple renaming it, like D1A and then a D1B for the farm teams and then D2. I mean, that way it would make sense, especially competition-wise, and they would still be separated. D2 wouldn't have to change anything. But I think the way it's set up right now is the way it should be set up. I just think there's some discrepancies as to how to handle competition, because roller hockey is kind of stuck in a somewhat of a limbo, if you will, in some of these regions where there's just not enough teams to really have that competition, especially on the D2 level.
That's good insight, and I like what you said about changing the name of D3, and that was obviously a change that was made to kind of get rid of, I think, some of the possible negative connotations with having a B division. And I'm going to throw it over to Nick Boyarski, who can probably chime in a little bit more on this. Nick's a coach for Arizona State's D1 team. He's also the head coach of the ASU D3 Black team, which has been known as one of the top D3 teams in the nation for the last couple of years.
I think the issue we run into, and we're maybe in a unique situation, is we end up with a division that, depending on the year, there might be one team that gives us somewhat of a game during the year, but the rest of the year we're kind of whomping on teams by 10 goals or more, which after you've played the same team like that 3 or 4 times, it ends up getting ugly and feelings get hurt and things like that. So we're in a unique position where, what do we do in that situation? We really don't have the opportunity to play D2 teams to get a better challenge. So we either play some D1 teams, and the reason we don't for D2 is, as I understand it, is they don't want to pay extra money to play extra games against a D3 team, because for them, the best possible scenario is they win. The worst possible scenario is they get beat by a D3 team, which they don't want to do. And it's extra money they don't want to have to pay to have that be the possibility. So our choice is pay for extra D1 games, which, depending on the year, might or might not be a good thing for our team. We did that last year, and Long Beach spanked us pretty good, but we've been better than we were in years past last year, and also been a lot better than we were last year. So I guess from our end, we'd love to see a division where we have more parity and someone else to play, but in the West, there's just not a lot of D3. I mean, our D1 kind of bounces from year to year. This should be a weird D1 year. So if the D1 teams are weaker, that means the D3 teams are going to be considerably weaker. So for us, our choices are pay a bunch of extra money to play D1 teams, don't get the opportunity to play D2 teams, or womp on a bunch of D3 teams and then not be prepared to play harder competition at nationals, which is, I think, what happened to us this year.
And something I want to just add in real quick. So I touched on briefly, and this was something that Jaron touched on too. Basically, the idea of whether it's called A or B or whether it's called B or D3, and kind of the connotation that brings. Do you think it's easier? I know this is something that Arizona State's been doing for a while, is just calling it a D3 team. Maybe it's you could argue that it's just simplicity. It's easier to do it that way. But do you think that calling it D3 versus calling it B makes it more appealing for guys to play, or do you think that really matters?
I think at this point, if you're using, for us in particular, if we're using our D3 team for the right thing, which is to actually hopefully develop D1 players, and it might not be all of them, but some of them get the opportunity to move up and down and earn their spot, and we did that this year. I don't think it's a negative connotation. I don't think, it's harder when you have two teams, because for us the negative connotation is not only am I playing D3, but I'm on the lower D3 team. And I know Lindenwood faces that issue every year where guys' feelings get hurt that they're on the lower D3 team. Still probably one of the top 5 D3 teams in the country, so I shouldn't really be complaining too much, but I get it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I wanted to touch on something you said about ACHA teams earlier, and I know some of the ACHA teams can play at large, and that's something that I've kind of loosely brought up to Brennan before, and that is, could we play a hybrid schedule? Could we play a schedule where we play some D1, D2, D3, but when we get to nationals, we're there as a D3 team? And the way the structure's set up, basically the only way that'll work is if we pay the extra money, but we still play all our D3 games, as I understand it.
And that brings up another thing that I'd like to talk about. And this is what happened to us this year at Nationals. You said something about a hybrid schedule. We noticed that Lindenwood Gold, which is a D3 team, plays mostly D1 teams.
Right.
So that doesn't make any sense to me.
As part of their schedule, not paying for extra game.
But they ended up playing nationals against D3 teams and ended up creaming everybody. So.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we'll have to discuss. And we've talked to Rob a little bit about hybrid schedules and being an at-large team and things of that nature. So we'll get into that too. I want to bring Ian Prescott on. He's a co-host of NCRHA Coast to Coast. Ian, you there, man?
Yeah, I don't know if you guys can hear me or not.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I gotcha, man.
All right.
Finally, there we go. So I think that some pretty good points were brought up just a second ago in regards to like what exactly constitutes playing at large, not playing at large. What are the stigmas and the connotations between playing in each level, so on and so forth. And I think it's kind of interesting. So I played literally. So my first year in the league, I played in D1. A couple years after that, I played in D4, which is like the development league. And then we moved up to D2, and then I finished playing in D3. So I've literally played in every division except for junior college in the NCRHA, which is kind of a unique situation. But I think the issue is depending where you are, you get hamstrung. So like, for example, there's 4 teams, I think, nationally where D2 teams have a secondary team. So you have like Stony Brook, you have Illinois State, Louisiana Tech, and UC Irvine and Arizona, so 5. And of all those teams, only one of them has a winning record, which is the University of Arizona. So I think what kind of happens is in the regions that have 3 or 4 teams, the Southwest or the Southeast, you get these weird kind of hybrid schedules where they play D2 teams, they play D1 teams, they play a couple D3 teams, they play an affiliate every once in a while. It can be frustrating for a team like Mizzou or a team like Slippery Rock in the East or even Arizona State in the West, where they want to play those kind of hybrid schedules, but they can't based on the strength of their region. And I don't know if there's a uniform way of kind of looking at things. Like even at the D1 level, in some other regions, you got D1 teams playing D2 teams, and then getting seeded higher at nationals. So it's just all very strange because I bet a team like Rhode Island could beat up on a couple of D2 teams pretty handily, and then boost themselves up where they don't have to play Lindenwood or Newman in the first round of nationals. So there's not enough. I don't think there's enough of a straight line between either all of the regions about how we're supposed to play it.
And that's I agree. I definitely agree with that, and I think that because of the current situation, this is something that's, we're kind of echoing a couple different people that have already said this, but the current layout of the league and where teams are, and not having really consistency in terms of the number of teams in each region and the strengths of the regions and organization and whatnot, kind of play into the fact that it would be really hard to standardize this across the board, and that's kind of obviously why we're having this conversation. I want to bring in Dan Leonard, who we haven't been able to introduce yet. Dan is the head coach of Rhode Island. Dan, before I bring you in fully, I'm going to play a little clip. You called into a coast-to-coast debate show we did a couple of years ago, talking about Rhode Island's program and your guys' decision to stay in D1. A quick recap before we play this clip. Rhode Island was a team that played in the national championship game in 2007. They went on to finish with 2 Elite 8 appearances in 08 and 09, and then I believe a Sweet 16 appearance after that, and then a couple of one winless season at 0 and 18, a couple of 3-win seasons. I believe the second was your first season, Dan, and then the building blocks have really started, including getting to regionals for a year, getting consecutive nationals bids now for the last 3 seasons, and working their way up from a team that didn't win a game at nationals to winning a couple of games at nationals, and then finally this year winning their pool and winning their first playoff game before falling to Newman. So this is a team that really fits, what in Rob's opinion would be kind of the standard, the ideal program in a program that's going through a rebuilding phase that doesn't just drop down to D2 because they want to quote-unquote play easier competition. So these were Dan's thoughts a couple of years ago, and then Dan, we'll get you to chime in on, if you feel any different about it now.
I think Coach Corey and myself, when we came in and I guess, took over the team as far as coaching a couple of years ago, which I'm sure nobody has forgotten about. But that sort of put fuel to the fire because, as guys that started the religion team had success, at the school and saw the competition level just, not maybe necessarily in the whole country, but at least in New England and the Mid-Atlantic area, we knew that most of the reason that URI wasn't really on the ring was just lack of, I would say, discipline and organization. They did have some talented guys. Before we started coaching, that's certainly a definite. But there was no structure. There was no style to the game. They were just running around like a bunch of chickens without heads, and that led to some undisciplined hockey. It happened to a lot of sports and a lot of teams. But we just felt that well, we could get to, and we think we can get to. And seeing some of the competition out there, and ultimately, I have no problem admitting it. I mean, it's definitely a pride thing. I mean, you just don't want to drop down to D2. For that reason, not a knock on any of the other teams that did or any of the teams, but you want to stay in that upper echelon, that upper group, that elite group, as some guys used earlier. And we wanted to, as a team, we wanted to do everything we can, if we could, to stay there. If that meant, a few less wins, and maybe less playoff appearances for a couple of years in terms of to rebuild things, we thought that was a much better long-term approach for the success of the program than the alternative, like you said, which would have been cheaper, easier, probably in some cases a little bit more fun in terms of the wins and losses. We weren't just looking for the 1 year. We were looking for long-term.
So Dan, obviously, a couple of years later, and you guys are in a certain kind of unique circumstance. You don't have a D3 team, and you haven't in the past even to build the D1 program that you guys have built and to keep it in D1. When you listen to that clip a couple of years ago and looking back on that, what are your thoughts?
Somebody's doing dishes in the background.
Really no, I mean, I would say, for the most part, my thoughts or my opinion hasn't really changed. If I was presented, if I were a new coach coming in right now, presented with the same information that I have now, I would still try and hold the program in, or hold the URI program in D1, and knowing that that's probably going to sacrifice some wins and take a more of the long-term approach. But I have pretty much the same opinion as what I said back then.
That's good, and I figured that would be the case. I'm trying to throw it back in here, but we're having a little bit of a technical issue trying to get Ian back on. So I'm gonna try to get him covered. And while I figure that out, obviously there's definitely a little bit of a difference between, there's kind of from what I'm getting out of this, and you guys can say if you agree or disagree. It seems like there's kind of two different aspects to this argument, which is basically you have your standard D1 and D2 kind of debate philosophy, why these divisions are the way they are, and then you also have kind of the what do we do with D3. So it seems like those are kind of the two divides, but they obviously intertwine because when you're deciding where D1 the line is between D1 and D2, you're also consequently drawing a line between D2 and D3. So what are some of the thoughts, some of the ideas that guys might have in terms of if things were going to change, what those changes might be, what they might look like, and so if anybody has something they want to throw in, I'll throw it over to Ian first, but we'll basically try to get an idea or two on the way things could change, and then people that maybe aren't proponents of that change can kind of chime in and say why that might not be the best idea. E, do you have anything you want to add to that, and then we'll kind of let our first opponents of the current system state their case?
Yeah, I just think, I think the way it is, it kind of comes down to, like, what is the end goal of the people who are in charge of the program. So you think about Hofstra, too, was another one of those programs that didn't want to drop down to D2, kind of as, like, a pride thing, and, like, they're still, grinding through with two teams that are kind of struggling at their individual levels. I think between their two clubs, they had like 4 total wins this year or something like that. So I think it really has a lot to do with what's the end goal of the program. Like, are they trying to win a national championship? So a team like UMass doesn't want to move up because they know that they had a chance at winning a national championship last year and this year, so they stayed down, which is like more power to them. It makes total sense. Same thing with Fullerton a couple years ago and everything like that as well. So it's really, you got to kind of consider what your organizational plan is in the end. Is it to win a national championship? Is it to develop to be a perennial powerhouse? Is it to make better people? So on and so forth.
And that's, I think, where the club leadership, and that's something that Rob talks about a lot, comes into play because and I think the reason that they have the structure they have now is they don't want a team that's going to hop into D1 and maybe be competitive for a year or two, end up bailing out because they're not an organized club. They don't have, a plan of succession moving forward in the future to make sure that there's somebody to take over the club when those guys leave. And that's something that we've seen in D2 time and time again. And, we've seen clubs, fall apart basically because they didn't have a plan set in stone. It was just they're just kind of worried about the guys that they had there. And so that's something where students have to kind of consider, you have to think about, the future of the club, and are other people going to be able to play roller hockey at your school based on the decisions that you make that are obviously going to affect, your time playing. And so I think you have to be a little bit unselfish in certain situations to do the right thing for your club. But if anybody wants to chime in, kind of, an opponent to the current system and maybe throw out some ideas on how to fix it. I know, Andrew, you might have some thoughts. If you want to go ahead and then we can kind of get some debate going and somebody can try to rebut that. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like if a team is going to move up or move down, I feel like that should be the league's discretion, but they should ask the team first what they feel like they should do. I mean, when it comes to that, I'm not really familiar. Like I said, this is only my second year being involved with the NCRHA. I don't have a whole lot of history, with things that's happened in the past. I know with my club, we have a D1 and a D3 team. Our D1 team kind of struggles, but we do well against certain teams, and we beat up on the D2 teams at D1. And then D3 we beat up on D2 teams, and then we struggle against a lot of the D3 teams, excluding one or two that should stay in D3. But I don't know. I feel like it should be up to the league,
Ultimately, I think everybody can agree that the idea is to get the most competitive, schedule possible without sacrificing kind of the integrity of what we're trying to do or the future of what we're trying to do. And obviously, I don't think it's a good idea to, continuously move teams up and down between divisions. But, for example, would you be okay with playing D2 teams that are of your competition, more often than, say, a Lindenwood that's obviously a quote-unquote D3 team, but they're better than you? Would you rather just play more competitive games at the end of the day? Or?
Yeah, without question. At the end of the day, I'd love to play like K-State, for instance. I mean, we love playing those guys. We always have evenly matched games, against both of our teams, honestly. Our D1 teams can usually beat them a lot of times, but our D3 team against their K-State's only D2 team, we usually have very evenly matched teams. I feel like if we were moved up to D2 maybe, our B team I'm talking about, that would work better for us, and then we wouldn't have to worry about playing Lindenwood Gold or Black or Bethel, who just, completely cream us a lot of times, and if not, we usually, hold them to maybe 1 or 2 goals, but they always end up winning anyway. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And as a D2 team in a kind of similar situation, as a higher end D2 team in your region, Jaron with Western Michigan, how do you guys feel about that? I mean, if you could play, say a Michigan State D3 consistently.
Well, we do.
Okay, there you go.
Well, here a perfect example. The last couple of years, because there's only been 3 D3 teams in the MCRHL, the 2 Michigan State D3 teams and then Grand Valley's D3 team. For them to play only themselves all year long would be ridiculous. So what they did is they actually pitted us. They play an even number of games against all the D2 teams throughout the entire season. And then at the end of the season, at regionals, they play it out and battle it out for the regional champion, and then they go on to nationals to play in D3. Mm-hmm. So they still play good competition throughout the whole year, which I think this year was actually probably the best year of that competition. I think we only lost to them by 1 goal or something like that. But it seemed to work out really well for the competition level. I mean, it was great for us because we got to see better competition as well. But then at the same time, they got to see a wider range of competition only being on a D3 team. I think for the regular season it makes sense, but at the end of the season, when you go to regionals and nationals, it needs to stay D1, D2, D3, or however you want to organize that.
Yeah, I think these are definitely some pretty solid points from everybody. How about from the guys who both coach in the D1 level? I mean, obviously you guys have a little bit different perspective. I mean, I don't think there has been a period of time recently where URI or Arizona State have either considered or been in a position where they've really strongly considered, playing at a D2 level or anything like that. What, Nick and Dan, what do you guys think about teams that you have seen move up or move down, or what do you think you should really expect out of a team that that comes into D1 that you might be playing, 3 or 4 times a season.
Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I'll start that out. I mean, it's I'm sure been rehashed to death 500 times, but the year that I had to watch a certain team womp on D2 teams all year long, and looked at the powers that be and went, why are these guys not playing D1 right now? This is a competitive, WCRHL D1 roster right here. And the respectable answer I got was, the explanation of why D2 teams are in D2 and why D1 teams are in D1 and all the things that just got talked about. And I agree that system is important for the long-term sustainability, but I don't think there's any reason at any particular point where, even at the halfway point of the season, you ask that team to go play, a D1 schedule to see where they're going to end up at nationals. And I don't know how often that scenario goes on in other regions. This might be an anomaly. It might not. I'll be honest, I've got my hands full with everything else, just paying attention to my own 2 divisions, so I don't pay a ton to D2, although my buddies at U of A, I root for them and I watch their games and stuff, so we do watch a little bit of that. But I think there's got to be a middle ground in between. This is how it is and teams play here all year, and nope, you're too good, you got to move up even if you don't want it. There's got to be some sort of middle ground there.
I agree with that. I mean, I think from a D1 perspective, I mean, and from a coach who has never had a B team or a D3 team, the biggest thing I think is the issues that D2 and D3 teams run into are region specific. I mean, based on the number of teams or lack thereof. So that automatically forces some combination of hybrid schedule, which creates a whole other set of issues. And I mean, the only issue it ultimately solves is getting these teams, a full season of games, as opposed to playing the same 1, 2, 3 teams over and over and over again. So while I get that, the hybrid schedule probably is a good thing, I think the thing I'm probably most critical of, and I certainly don't have a concrete solution to it, is kind of to what Nick was touching on, is when a team goes to move up or move down, whether it's during the off season, which the majority of the time that's when it happens, or even during the middle of the season. If I'm not mistaken, I think we had a team out west within the last year or two that I think was getting their butts handed to them pretty good, and then dropped down a division, I think, early on in the season or mid-season. I could be wrong on that. But to Nick's point, if a team comes out of the gate in D2, and I know exactly what he's talking about because I had a very similar opinion that he has for, that same team. If they come out and they're running train on everybody and there's no games that are close, well, yeah, this is roller hockey. There's nothing to say that we can't have them bump up to a Division I schedule of some kind to make these games more competitive, especially for some of the D2 and D3 teams. I can understand completely from, the quote-unquote Lindenwood region where a lot of these D3 teams have to go out and play, one of the Lindenwood D3 teams who, really could stay on the floor with most D1 teams and beat the majority of the D1 teams. That definitely is an issue. Again, I don't know what the ultimate solution is. When you have, some of these perennial powerhouse programs like the Lindenwoods that have been doing this. I mean, hell, they've been doing this since I was there, in the URI, and this was 15 years ago. To some of the Newmans and the Bethels and even the Michigan States, the UNLVs as of late, I think it's great that some of these teams have been able to put together the year after year success, on the rink and organizationally. But at the same time, I think some of the criteria that's looked at and when teams get held their feet to the fire and when they're going to jump up or jump down, I don't know that that's necessarily consistent across the board because, again, playing devil's advocate, I see a lot of teams that I don't feel are in the right division. And, again, I don't really necessarily have the concrete solution. That's part of the reason I'm here to talk about it with you guys. But, that's just kind of my spiel.
Yeah, I think that's those are all really good points, and I just want to clarify in terms of positions. Nick and Dan, are you guys on board with a team say making a divisional move mid-season if a team is clearly if a D2 team is clearly hands down not only meeting the organizational criteria but also whomping on everybody. Are you going to nationals as a D2 team, or would they make that jump mid-season and become a D1 team?
I mean, I think if it's, you know, depending on, again, I would say depending on the region, because a lot of it has the overall amount of teams and therefore the level of competition. But if a team is that much of an extreme, let's say in the good case, organizationally and on the rink, then my, I guess, short answer would be, well, then if you ask me, they should be, that's a D1 team. Why they're in D2 or wherever the decision was to say they should be a D2 team, in my opinion, that's the wrong decision. If they're organized right and their product on the rink is top notch, that fits the criteria of a D1 team. Therefore, they should be a D1 team. If that happens to make that decision or gets rectified mid-season, so be it.
Yeah, I agree with almost everything you just said. I think to play a little devil's advocate, if I was looking at it from the other end and I said, okay, here I am with a D2 team. I tell my players at the beginning of the year, here's your financial commitments, because D1 and D2 have obviously different equipment, things that they have to do, matching this, matching that. All of a sudden you tell that team, guess what, you're playing D1, and you're playing it the rest of the year, so better go out and get yourself gloves and better go get yourself this and that. I could see where that would be an issue. I don't know if necessarily that is you tell that team they have to play up the entire year and through nationals, or if you just tell them, you're going to play some D1 games. If I'm that D2 team, and again, everybody's different, I'd be asking to do that because I want to be better prepared to play D2 in the nationals.
Right.
So the things I'm talking about, when I watch those guys womp on teams, it's like, at that point, you're not getting any better. And it's the same back to my D3 teams. We're not prepared for nationals because we haven't been challenged all year. We have no idea how to face adversity. We have no idea what to do when we're down by a goal. Our power play is atrocious because nobody plays a penalty kill that makes us play well. And then we get to nationals, and all of a sudden it's a whole different world. So I guess it's a difference in mentality. But to go back to your scenario, if you tell that team, we're going to make you play a higher schedule, are you then hurting those other D2 teams who say, well we're still going to have to face them at nationals, so now we're not even as prepared because we haven't been able to play them all year?
Yeah, I could see where that could be an issue, and I mean, let's be honest, we are talking about Fullerton a couple of years ago. I think everybody knows that. And as far as I know, the main reason that situation played out was because they had said going into the season with their divisional application form, which is something that we're going to kind of bring into the picture here. This is under the current format, the way that teams are put into a certain division. Obviously, a team submits an application that says, this is why we feel like we should be in this division. The league looks at it and then makes a decision to approve or deny that divisional application, and would then say, you have to move up, or, very rarely are they going to move a team down to D2. They're most, obviously they're going to try to keep as many teams in D1 as possible and ultimately move teams up once they're ready. But, Fullerton put in their divisional application form, and they said that they were losing a lot of guys, and it turned out that the guys that they thought they were losing, they were not actually losing, and they basically returned a full team when they had told the league that they were pretty much going to lose everybody. And I think that's kind of where that situation came out of. They were obviously organized enough to be a D1 club, and then the following season they moved this team up to D1. The first tournament they were getting smoked. I think they lost a game maybe 15-0 or 14-1, something like that, and then immediately decided, all right, well, we're going to move this team back to D2 because if we don't, then these kids might not quit, or they might quit, they might not play, whatever. That's important because I got a question from Christian Ricketts. He used to be part of the board of directors for Slippery Rock University's team, played at both the D1 and D2 and D3 levels. And something that he mentioned in terms of players quitting, and obviously we want to make sure that I think one of the goals is obviously to grow this league and enable as many college kids as possible, give them a chance to play college roller hockey, and participate in this and be a part of it. And so on that note, I think that it's important to consider these decisions, when a team is asked to move up or move down and the effect that can have. And that's something Christian alluded to. He said, I've reached out to players who will not play, knowing that they will have to face Newman, Lindenwood, Michigan State, etc., and have absolutely no chance to win. This applies at both D1 and D3 levels. And I think he's obviously talking about the prospect of winning a national championship. What can be done to encourage more schools to play and also more players once they've, been a part of the situation and see how it is? Andrew, I'm gonna throw it over to you. I know you're new to the league, but obviously you've talked about this a little bit, so you can chime in on your nationals experience and if you had any guys that felt that way, and then I'm gonna throw it over to Ian and he can add his 2 cents as well.
Well, to answer your question about trying to get more people to play the sport and play in the NCRHA, I played, just a little background around me. I played ice hockey up until like middle school, and then started playing roller hockey and ice. And then I played in the Misha League, which is the Missouri High School Roller Hockey League. And a lot of those players end up playing college. A lot of them go to Lindenwood. Some go to Mizzou, Umsel, etc. But I don't know what it is in other regions or other states and whatnot, how they handle that. I don't even know how many high school leagues there are.
Well, and real quick, I mean, we got about maybe 12 minutes left here, and I don't want to. Obviously, I'm going to let you finish making your point, but I just wanted to chime in terms of getting more players in general into the sport. We're gonna have another conversation on that, and so maybe I probably shouldn't have gone into too much depth on Christian's question, or I'll rephrase it here for you. That we will have another topic on that, and we'll definitely bring you on to discuss, because I know you have some pretty, kind of unique views in terms of the roller hockey world in some of those areas. I do want to touch on the high school thing, though, that you mentioned. A lot of these people look at programs like, say, Lindenwood, obviously, Newman a little bit. Newman's obviously in, outside of Philadelphia, it's a roller hockey hotbed, but obviously Lindenwood and Michigan State, as well as teams like Farmingdale and New York, all the New York schools, they have very, very strong high school roller hockey leagues. And I don't think people realize that if you look at a Lindenwood roster, they don't really have that many players from out of state. The majority of them are players from Missouri that played Missouri high school roller hockey. Yep. And that's the same, like you talked about Umsel and other programs. I know that that's kind of the same deal. You look at Farmingdale, they're the same way. So high school, I think, is a big part of that plays into it. And even Pittsburgh, it's funny that Christian mentioned, he went to Slippery Rock outside of Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh has over 60 high school teams. So you would think that they would have a little bit easier of a job recruiting than quite a few other people. But in terms of growing the sport and those things, we'll leave that to the side. But when it comes to knowing, I guess, the competition you're going to have to face, is there an issue? Is there a struggle getting guys to commit to playing, knowing that you're going to have those games, where you're not going to be able to compete? And quite frankly, it really is almost impossible for, in a lot of ways at least, the way that many people would look at it, for a team like, say, Mizzou or an Arizona or even a D3 team that doesn't even make it to nationals to be competitive and ultimately play for a title.
I can tell you in my league, especially in my region, I'm sorry, a lot, like the guy that runs the high school league in our region or in our state is one of the coaches for Lindenwood, Mike Bell. So he gets a lot of kids to go to Lindenwood that he sees playing all the time because he's at all the high school games and whatnot. He's kind of recruiting all the players right then and there, it seems like. So that you got that going on. And with my school at Mizzou, a lot of people just go to Mizzou because they want to go to Mizzou, and hockey's secondary. That was honestly the case for me. I wanted to go to Mizzou, and I just said, okay, well, I'm going to play roller hockey here. I played in high school. I thought I couldn't make the ice team, and just decided to go out for roller hockey. So that's That's the situation in St. Louis and in Missouri for the most part, as far as I know.
And Ian, as a player, I mean, do you ever feel like it's tough to get guys to commit, after going to nationals? Or I guess, the way that I'm kind of looking at the situation is you think about a team when they get their nationals bid, and I think this is kind of where the question might be coming from. You play all season, you've paid your money, you've been committed for however long, and the time comes, you get a bid to nationals, maybe you're an alternate bid, and ultimately, you end up being asked if you want to go, and you have to kind of make that decision. Even if we're not really going to be competitive, do we go and play? I mean, is this really an issue? Is this something that is more situational, and guys need to kind of sack up and go play if they want to play, or is this a serious problem that we got to look at? Making sure that there is a national championship for true D3 teams that are more or that aren't just a developmental team for their program, which is obviously the case for an MSU, a Lindenwood, an ASU. These teams that might not, these players may never play on a D1 team at their school, or they may never progress to that next level. Does there need to be a championship or a division that's exclusively for those teams, or is it kind of is it all right the way that it is?
So I mean, you don't even have to just look at it for like D3. I mean, how many times, or didn't we have an odd number of D1 teams at nationals this year?
Yeah, we didn't
23.
have to. Yeah.
We had 23.
Yeah.
I mean, and I know 2 years in a row that I know the guys at Northeastern still. I know 2 years in a row they didn't go. I mean, obviously this year they weren't as good as they were in prior years. And the year before they went down to Florida and got their butts kicked, and they we got a nationals bid. Well, we're not going because we're not flying out to what they felt was an undesirable spot in Kansas City, and an equally undesirable spot in Iowa, which I don't think was true. I thought the venues were pretty nice, but to them, they felt like it didn't make sense to go and to go and get their butt kicked for 4 or 5 games straight. And I think that that's something that ends up happening because we've started to move a little bit further away from what used to define this league as a players' league. Like, for example, when teams put in a divisional application and they submit it and everything like that, and then the team appeals, has any team ever been contacted about that team appealing, or information about that team or anything like that? It's just something that just goes straight to the league, right? I don't know if you guys have ever gotten that.
No, which I think is part of the problem. The criteria of whoever is involved or not of when a team is going to, put in their divisional application. I think if there's a legitimate debate or appeal in there, that needs to be heard.
Yeah, I think that. So I think my issue is that 1 year that we're kind of referring to with Fullerton and everything like that. I don't understand why that year each D2 team and then each of the D1 teams didn't have a chance to say, okay, Fullerton put in this appeal. What do each of you think about that vote, whether or not you think this team should be in D2 still, be in D1? It doesn't need to be the end-all, say-all or anything like that. If Western Michigan got forced to move up next year, do you think that, Michigan Tech and Michigan State and all those guys should be able to vote and ask whether or not that team deserves to be moved up or not? And if the league says, oh, this team should be moved up, and the players say that this team should be moved up, then then we have a consensus and we have a lot less issues that come up. Because I think that the people, even though there's league officials who watch a lot of the games, they don't watch every game and they're not invested in it like the players are. And I think that when you start thinking about parity and who belongs where and who should be going to nationals and all that kind of stuff, the people who should have the biggest say in that are the people who are paying to go there. So I think that's what the kind of big issues are. I know, Jaron, I know you haven't had an opportunity to talk for a little bit, but I didn't know if you had any input on that as well.
I feel like what you're saying is, we feel like maybe the players should have more say on some of these decisions. I almost feel like maybe a solution may be found in having player representation in the organizations. How we have a league director and all this other stuff. Why don't we have a player representative from each region? that is voted on by all the players in each region, and then they represent the players' decision in all these larger decisions that are made. I feel like that would allow a little more connect between all of the rumblings going on between all of us, if you will, between us and what the league decides to do.
Mhm.
I like that.
It might offer a lot more transparency. So I guess that's just a thrown out idea there.
No, that's good, and ultimately, I mean, that's what we want are some solutions and some things that we can kind of move forward with. We got a couple of minutes left here. I think it's really important to kind of key in on what was just said. Obviously, the main 2 points being made of things that we can look at moving forward: debate or appeal of divisions that should essentially be heard by member clubs, whether it's a D1 team, a D2 team moving up, or a D2 team trying to stay where they're at. Having D1 and D2 teams weigh in on that and seeing where their views are before a decision is made, and then having player representation in each region or from each region voted on by the players in each region that would represent the players in both regional and national decisions being made. So those are 2 really good points, and those are things that we can obviously move forward with. But I think ultimately it comes down to how these divisions are structured. That is going to play into all of these things happening. And if people aren't on the same page about how these divisions are structured, even if they may not necessarily agree on why it is the way it is, but if we can't get people to see why it is the way it is, and kind of go through with it, it kind of, it reminds me of kind of like a political debate. Like, things are the way they are, and so we have to take the way that things are right now and work with them, and not just say, this is the way that I want things to be. I'm not going to do anything about any of this until things change big time. We kind of have to look at things and say, all right, how can we take this current system, obviously look to make changes to it, structurally moving forward, but can we get everybody on the same page to work towards some goals right now that can make sure that teams are competitive and that everyone is represented equally, etc. So a couple other things that got kind of brought into the conversation that I want to mention. I've talked to Ian about this. We've put stuff out on Twitter, etc. There are a lot of factors that go into why a team might play in a certain region. Something I have a couple buddies that go to Long Beach State, and something that they mentioned to me, and I've had a lot of other people mention to me, is you don't think about something like admissions criteria or who is applying to the school. So I pulled out a program from nationals and I started looking through, hometowns of where a lot of these guys are, and granted, not all of them are accurate, but you start noticing some schools don't have a single out-of-state player. Other schools, have players from a variety of places, and I think so something like that is really important. If a school is harder to get into because the academics are stronger, that's obviously going to affect your potential player pool, if you will, and depending on where that school is and how big roller hockey or hockey is in general in that area, that is going to determine completely what team or how good your team can be. There's only going to realistically be a certain level unless your team's practicing 5 or 6 days a week, and has all these resources from the school, etc. A team, so say like a Western Michigan, obviously, Jaron, you guys are in, Michigan, which is a hotbed for roller hockey and hockey in general, but you're on the western side of the state, which is not, the Detroit area. So for someone like you, and then I'm going to let Dan chime in from Rhode Island, and then Andrew, kind of talk about maybe 1 or 2 of the things real quick that are, kind of your obstacles for building your program, and then we're going to take those those things, and we're going to go into a future show with some of those things when we talk about how to build programs and how each individual program can be a little bit better. And then lastly, I'll throw it to Nick to wrap things up from a, kind of one of the more quote-unquote powerhouse programs perspectives, and then Ian and I will finish. So we'll start with Jaron. Go ahead, man.
I think the important thing to recognize in the Michigan hockey demographic is, I would say, 80% of roller hockey players in the state of Michigan come from the Detroit metro area. No question about it. And this is where you're talking about academics and how many players guys or certain teams can get. Michigan is a perfect example of this. Much higher standards for getting into Michigan as opposed to Michigan State, but and they're dropping down, if I remember correctly, down to D2 this year, because they just can't get the players like Michigan State can. Michigan State has just had a long-standing position in the MCRHL. They are a huge magnet for those Detroit kids, and it's only an hour away from Detroit, so it's not like they have to travel far if they want to go to Michigan State. The other thing that happens in roller hockey is kind of players' commitment to each other. You'll see guys following each other to certain schools. They play together in high school at different age levels, and they'll follow each other to all these different schools. We saw it with Central Michigan a few years ago, where for some odd reason a few guys went to Central, and they just brought a bunch of great roller hockey players with them, and then ended up walking to the D2 National Championship. But the main one is Michigan State, where year after year they just keep turning out these roller hockey players out of Detroit, and it's like an assembly line, if you will.
You can look at Newman too with
Yeah.
the black ice guys that they have, and I mean we can go on. But yeah, go ahead. I just want to throw that in.
So yeah, but as far as Western Michigan goes, we're kind of in a geographically central location where we're able to get a few guys from the Chicago area as well. But almost all of our guys are from the Detroit metro area too. So like I said, it's really geographical and just dependent on how prestigious your organization is, which we're trying to build towards that, if you will. So.
Those are all good points, and obviously Tours being in Kalamazoo this year is going to be something that's good for you guys. So
we've been pushing that so hard recently because we just need a place to skate in Kalamazoo.
Yeah, that's great. Being able to have, I know what you guys did, setting up their arena a couple months ago, being able to play there, some MCRHL games there. That's pretty awesome. And so, moving forward, we'll talk to you about some ideas in terms of recruiting and stuff like that, with Tours being in your own backyard. Andrew, how about with you guys in Mizzou, maybe one or two obstacles that you guys are facing and that we can maybe try to tackle as a community this summer as we try to build, give some resources for programs moving forward.
Well, I can tell you one thing that I don't know if you guys can help with this, but Mizzou just does not really care about our teams, and I say that just it's the damn truth. They don't care about roller hockey. They don't care about ice hockey. All they care about is football and basketball, and baseball and softball and whatnot. But they care about the major SEC sports. We just moved to the SEC. Obviously you guys have no affiliation with the NCAA, but they don't really care about the roller hockey leagues with ice hockey and whatnot. We've had some problems with drinking and whatnot at the games for spectators and stuff, so they're having problems. We just need more funding, and what goes along with that is we need a rink. In Central Missouri, we only have like a derby rink, and then we have Jefferson City's ice rink, which is 30 minutes away, and we can't practice ice. That's not really going to help us. So if we want to practice, we have to drive an hour and 45 minutes to Queenie or to Madison in St. Louis to get a practice in. And guys,
there is an outdoor rink over there, right? In Columbia?
Yeah, but we'd all have to buy the, like concrete, wheels, outdoor wheels and whatnot, and it's not as safe and stuff, and we probably should practice a little bit there, but it's just not ideal, and we got a little derby rink that we just don't like either.
And we got the same situation here in Kalamazoo. Exactly. I completely agree.
Yeah. And then, and as far as getting people to play, other than what I said before, we just found out that there's a bunch of people in fraternities and whatnot that just want to get involved with that kind of stuff, and they used to play hockey in high school and whatnot, and they just don't want to play anymore. And I don't understand why. You might as well. I mean, if they had the money to be in a fraternity, I'm hoping maybe they could go out and play with us sometime, because we only have one practice a week, if any at all, and one game or I'm sorry, 3 games every 2 weeks. So we could really use the players.
I will say this, in talking, I mean, I was heavily involved with our sports club organizations at Western. Every single sports club goes through this. I mean, all these issues you're outlining, like we don't have anywhere to play, we can't get enough people interested. There's hundreds of clubs that go through these same exact problems. And obviously we have to deal with each one of those individually. And it takes a lot of work from the members in those organizations. So I definitely feel you up here in Kalamazoo, man.
Thank you.
Ian, as somebody that was very involved with club sports, and we'll probably got about 3 minutes left here. As somebody that was very involved with club sports at a university institutional level, you were the head of the University of Arizona's club sports department. From a graduate student perspective, can you just talk a little bit about that kind of? Obviously, U of A is a pretty big club, or a pretty big school. I would say it's pretty relatable to, say, a Mizzou in that regard. Maybe just talk about, kind of briefly how some of those decisions are made. Or Ian, you there?
Yeah, go ahead. Say it again.
Oh, just briefly, if you could just kind of maybe talk about, in maybe a minute or so, your experiences with being involved in the administrative side of club sports from an institutional standpoint.
Yeah, I think from like an institutional standpoint, the issue is that a lot of schools don't have people who have played all the sports they moderate. Like, for example, like if you have 40 club sports at a school where you have ballroom dance and archery and ultimate frisbee and also ice and roller hockey, some of those people have no idea what you need for any of those things. Like some people, when they hear roller hockey, they're like, oh, you play with a ball or you play on asphalt or something like that. So they don't understand what you actually need as a group. So like that becomes like the big issue. And I think that administratively the biggest issue is teams kind of had to get to a point where they prove that they can utilize one of the facilities that are being offered as a viable practice area. So the big thing at the University of Arizona was we had a rink, but it was hardwood, and they didn't want us to play on a hardwood rink. So I think what really needs to happen is that, and this comes back to the whole idea of like players, a players league and player transparency and all that kind of stuff. Every team that practices on a wood floor, so I know Syracuse does it. I know I think Las Vegas used to do it on a wood floor at one of their like old roller skating rinks that was out west. Every team that has a wood floor, I think ASU has a wood floor rink that you don't use it, but I think there's like. Yeah.
It's forecourt, isn't it, Kevin?
No, it's like a laminate wood. It's actually the exact same. It's a carbon copy of what's at U of A, Ian. What's in Tucson.
Oh, is it?
Pretty much the same. Yeah, pretty much the same layout. Maybe 2/3 of a rink, hardwood laminate flooring. But obviously, we're allowed to skate on it there.
Right.
Whereas you guys aren't at U of A, and I know that's kind of where you're going with this. So go ahead.
So like every school that plays on a hardwood floor needs to send in to the league, or the league needs to ask, where do you practice? Like, do you practice? How often do you practice? And then to compile all these things together, compile pictures of what the floor looks like, compile how hard these people practice, a video of how the teams practice on these things. So schools can get a place where, in Kalamazoo, so you guys can practice on a basketball floor. Or at Mizzou, you can practice on a basketball court or anything like that. because not everybody has, the luxury of being able to practice at a local rink that's not too far away. Northeastern had to drive 45 minutes to a rink. Luckily, the U of A had like 15 minutes away. They had a rink that they could use, but those are expending costs because you got to rent those rinks. So the biggest thing is that club sports departments need to be shown, literally handheld, because they've never played all these sports, how these things can be done. And the only way to do that is to do it through strength and numbers, and that's something that we need to do as a league.
Yeah, again, it takes a lot of all the lifting work comes from us.
Yep.
Right? Like us, who
100% agree.
Stuff done. So, like Ian said, we've got to be the ones to show them that they're not just going to come out and on their own time and look at our situation.
Dan,
they're not going to spend $50,000 on tile either. So
right.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. Is obviously some of the nuances that come along with roller hockey. We talked about equipment. We talked about outdoor versus indoor, having different wheels and things like that. Surface. Roller hockey, I think, has two issues that some of these other sports might not have, and that's that you have school-specific problems, which are everywhere. As Jaron mentioned, there are club sports problems at every school with most sports, most club sports. Every club sport has its own issues that they have to deal with. But when we talk college roller hockey, you have school-specific issues, and then you also have sport-specific issues, which some other sports don't have to deal with in the same ways that we do. Obviously, ACHA ice hockey doesn't have a lot of the kind of nuanced variable issues that roller hockey has. And so those are things that, as we talk about building programs, we're going to keep going with that. I think every point that's been made so far is valid, not only valid, but really contributes to this conversation and is going to give us a lot of material and ideas moving forward when we continue these discussions. Dan, I'm going to throw it over to you to kind of add your 2 cents, and then over to Nick.
As far as obstacles, I mean, I'll circle back to what a couple of these other guys were saying. I mean, facilities, rinks is forever going to be an Achilles heel, I think, for roller hockey. Especially, again, going back to when I was still skating and in that, in the late 90s and the early 2000s, where there was rinks everywhere, at least here in New England. Now they're closing up, if they're not already closed, they're closing up left and right. I know there used to be, half a dozen rinks within an earshot of Northeastern and BU and in the greater Boston area that, New England had its own region at one time because there was enough teams and enough facilities to support that. Now, obviously, not so much the case. We drive a half an hour to play and practice at our facility. But, that's a hell of a lot better than some teams that don't have an option to drive somewhere. They got to drive 2 hours, 3 hours, or something even worse, which, from my standpoint, I can only imagine how much of a hindrance that must be. But one thing I'll also echo, too, which, I won't say in really a positive way, but yeah, club sport teams at every school, now doing this for 6 years and playing for a little over 5, it's all on the students, and or the coaches or it's the program. The club sports department is not going to roll out the red carpet for a roller hockey team. They're not going to know what you want. They're not going to know what you need. And they're certainly not going to go out of their way to ask you what you want and what you need. You're going to have to be the aggressor. You're going to have to go out of your way, put in the extra effort to get, whether it's tape, rinks, recruits, all the above. It really does fall on the students and on the players, and in some cases on the coaches too. But it's a constant battle. I think from a regional standpoint, you guys highlighted a lot of it when you say sort of the roller hockey hotbeds. The greater St. Louis area, the Philly/New York City area that bleeds into Long Island, certainly part of the greater Detroit area, Southern Cal, Arizona. I mean, these are roller hockey hotbeds, and when you have as many schools, let's say in the ECRHA as we do, Newman obviously has taken their program and their recruiting and to a whole nother level. And is really capitalized on the amount of roller hockey talent that's in one of those hotbeds. And schools like URI and that is a bigger school probably has some things that to offer that Newman doesn't, and vice versa. But we have to work that much harder and travel a little bit further into one of the hotbeds to try and get guys to come out of state, and that can be a hurdle too. So I definitely hear what you guys are saying. I think some of these are good problems to have. I think some of these are going to be forever problems that we'll have. But I think the biggest thing is that I've taken away from this discussion is I think there is definitely a need for a unified, player's voice, if you will, or opinion or association, if you will, to have a voice and have a voice of reason so that the league can hear from us on a regular basis. Because right now, most of it comes from, a few random emails that we fire off, usually because we're pissed off at something, or, the C2C, the coast to coast. You guys have really provided, the first avenue that we can talk about this stuff, like we're doing right now. And I think if the league directors and the board were able to see this and partake in this and sit on the other side of the table, I think we could really make serious strides into addressing some of the hurdles that we've been kind of talking about year after year after year.
Our Roller Hockey Players Anonymous meeting.
Yes.
I don't know if that's a place that you want to be at, depending on who you invite. I know Nick's over there laughing as he thinks about some of these outcast guys he's got to deal with. Nick, go ahead. Your kind of final thoughts on this. You can kind of give your perspective as someone with a strong program, but also your perspective on the sport and the things that you see, as you travel around and
Sure.
what you're thinking.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that to touch on something that was talked about by a couple of you guys. Our ASU program thanks in basically solely to Alex Dote, who was our club's founder, 9-year player, and still coach with me now. Our program has not once, other than early on in its existence, had any school support at all. We were completely student funded for a long time, and one of the reasons for that was I love roller hockey players to death, but they're not exactly the most responsible people a lot of the times, and the amount of flaming hoops that we had to jump through blindfolded, doused in gasoline just to get some school support were a deterrent for all those guys. And I will give credit to Kyle Friedman and some of the guys on our D3 club this year who said, this is dumb. We're at one of the largest universities in the country. The Quidditch team gets sponsorship. Why don't we? That's a real thing, by the way. There's an ASU club Quidditch team.
Yep.
And they went and got
They get broadcast time.
What's that?
They get national broadcast time.
I would imagine they're probably on ESPN too. But these guys were able to go and actually do what nobody's done in our program for a long time, which is go sit in meetings and go do the stuff they need to do to actually get school funding. And we did this year, and we will next year, and it's building. We just had our meeting with the athletic department, and they're very eager to work with us as a club sport. There's a ton of money earmarked there. There's a ton of, we got, in our second year, I think we're at the full funding the school will give us. And it's nowhere near what Lindenwood has, and it's nowhere near what a bunch of the other schools have, and ASU is a very wealthy school because there's 400,000 people going there, but it can be done, and I guess that's one of the things I wanted to touch on and throw a little props out to the guys that actually got off their butts and did it for us. Real quick, because I know you're running out of time, I will say this, Kevin, and you kind of gave me a good opening for it. I had a unique opportunity over this summer so far to travel to some regions to see youth hockey that I have not seen before, other than at nationals where you get to see some of their teams. I was in St. Louis for an Arch qualifier, I was in Florida for an Arch qualifier, and I was in Atlanta for an Arch qualifier. And I got to see in those places the completely different regions. Like, I am shocked that Florida Gulf Coast has teams because there's no youth hockey there. I'm proud of those guys for putting together what they do. It's a beautiful school, by the way. I drove through that school. I'd go there if I was a college student. It's beautiful. But some of those markets are just dead. They're dead youth roller hockey markets. We had that Arch qualifier in the Fort Myers one-rink facility in Florida, and there was not a ton of youth hockey to be played there in a city where Arch finals is this year. So I think
And a city where college nationals are next year.
yeah, college nationals are next year, right? So I think part of this is on us. We all don't do enough already, but part of this is on us to have youth affiliations. I mean, I'm lucky with ASU in that I have a youth travel program, a couple of them that play at different times of the year under different names, and I know my players are looking forward to either going to ASU or going to other colleges to continue playing roller. I think one of the things that you guys can do is form affiliations with whatever youth hockey there is in your town. Send U of A does a great job of it. There is a junior Wildcats youth program that plays tournament hockey in Tucson. And I guarantee you all those kids are dreaming of the day that they get to go to U of A and wear that jersey of the guys that they see out there helping them coach. So I think that's something that we can all do as college programs, even if it's you send a player to a practice, you do free clinics, or whatever it is. One team doing it is obviously not going to make a huge change, but if we're talking about a movement across the country we can do, that's definitely one of the things we can do.
And that's what we're looking for with this tours coming back to Kalamazoo. I mean, there's absolutely no roller hockey in Kalamazoo, so we're hoping that kind of sparks a little fuse, if you will.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the NCRHA, I bring this up to Brennan all the time, and I know he's given me actually very valid reasons why they don't anymore, but there should be NCRHA presence at tours. There should be NCRHA presence at state wars. There should be NCRHA presence at Narch. And if that means that every player has to pay $20 more next year, let's charge everyone $20 more.
Right.
I mean, whatever that reason is, this is for sustainability for this league that we all love, and that's where we're going to find those kids. I mean, we get kids at ASU that had no idea there was college roller that end up at our team, at our practice because they hear from someone else. I'm curious how many kids don't end up there because they just never knew about it. I mean, we got literally, no joke, probably 200,000 ASU students between all the campuses. We should be turning away 60, 70, 80 players a season to build our teams.
Right.
I have that problem with 15,000 at URI, Nick. I mean, I have kids that have, they know there's an ice hockey team, but they never knew there was a roller hockey team if their life depended on it. And I have a school, a good-sized school, but still significantly smaller than yours. Just to echo real quickly, and sorry to interrupt, but one thing that's worked for me in the past couple of years that's really starting to take some momentum is, there wasn't really any type of youth, whether it's high school or youth hockey or youth roller hockey in Rhode Island. Now, granted, Rhode Island's really, really small, but just in the greater area, whether it's parts of Connecticut or even southeastern Mass, it didn't really exist. It was kind of a dying breed, and doing some things like you said, going to the couple of guys that do play, you start to show up at one of their open skates or one of their practices or go to one of their tournaments, and then you get a couple more guys interested. Now, Rhode Island's got a youth tournament team. Granted, they're not the most savvy and most seasoned guys out there, but they're there. They're committed to the game, they're committed to the program, and they're committed to staying with the sport. So if you can build off that and just, baby steps with that, long term, like you said, a movement across the country like that should go a long way.
Yep. No, every region takes somebody doing it. I've got buddies in Oregon who are trying to bring roller hockey back to a market that used to be pretty big, and that's all those. When those types of things happen, they revolve around a couple people being active, not to keep Tucson, but Tucson youth roller hockey was completely dead 3 years ago, literally dead. There was no youth roller hockey.
Same with Rhode Island, completely dead.
And all it took was, and these are actually guys that were helping out and playing on U of A too, so more props to them, but it took those guys deciding they wanted to bring youth roller hockey back and working hard for it. I mean, we all want to see it grow, but it's not going to do it organically. People are going to have to get involved and force it to happen.
Yep.
Yes.
Just like that too. We talk about problems that club sports have. Obviously, you have your own issues within youth roller hockey and roller hockey as a whole. I mean, you look at, say, Tucson. Tucson doesn't have a permanent ice rink. It's the largest city in the country that doesn't have a permanent sheet of ice. And so being able to use the fact that there is a year-round indoor sport court roller hockey facility when you only have ice, maybe 3 or 4 months out of the year and it's very spotty, it's in for 2 weeks, it's out for a week, etc., I think was something that, really helped Tucson out. When you talk about somewhere like Rhode Island or Kalamazoo, the obstacles are that ice hockey is so big. and that, in other sports, obviously. And so that's something that, that's another part of the conversation, obviously, that, is going to have to be saved for the future. But for Jaron and what you guys are trying to do with Kalamazoo, my 2 cents, my first thought would be see if you can find some guys that are ice hockey players in Kalamazoo that are, youth players or whatever, team up with one of the local youth ice associations if possible, and try to get some of those kids playing tours if they're not already playing at finals, because obviously the qualifier season's winding down, I don't know, and besides playing AAA, what options those teams might have, but if there is a strong Tier 1 program in Western Michigan, trying to get some of those guys involved in playing at tours, because I think that that's really the only way for you guys to make a footprint in this scenario, besides obviously going to tours and promoting the fact that you have a program. But if you want to make roller hockey happen in your community, you got to figure out a way to get your community involved with this awesome roller hockey, activity, this tournament that's going to be going on in your backyard. Yeah, I think that's a challenge.
We definitely pushed for that when we had regionals here back in the winter. We got the whole downtown Kalamazoo organization, the promoting organization involved, because they're always looking for stuff to push. But we surprisingly had a bit of backlash when we tried contacting the Western Michigan club ice hockey team. I don't know what it is, but they are just so tight about not giving up anybody. They won't even give us their cut list for players. It's ridiculous.
I got my first cut list this past year, and this was my 6th year. Yeah. And the coach still won't talk to me.
Right.
I think,
and I don't know if that's the same with like the local youth ice hockey organizations. We haven't really prodded into that yet, but I think with tours coming around, we'll definitely have a great opportunity to do that.
Real quick, I just want to, Nick, 10 seconds real quick. Just some of the struggles with ice hockey, obviously, getting youth ice involved. I think it's pretty simple answer. Follow the money trail in terms of trying to get ice coaches on board. They got to fill their ice, and that's one of the struggles.
That's obviously what it is. By the time guys get to college age, though, they're making their own decisions. ASU is kind of a unique position. We've got an NCAA team now. We've got 2 ACHA teams. And legitimately, probably 100 kids get cut even from the bottom ACHA team. So we're in a completely different scenario, and we're lucky in that God, I'm going to out him here. He's probably going to kill me. The NCAA coach plays men's league roller hockey on the weekends. And
yeah.
Sorry, Greg. But that's a friend to roller hockey, and that's a guy that I can text him and say, hey, we're struggling for a goalie this year. And he will give me a cut list. He'll literally give me guys emails. Hey, we cut these 5 guys. One of them used to play roller. Give him a ring. But again, unique position, and I know it's not like that everywhere. And he's willing to do that because they've got so much surplus. These other guys are fighting. They're club sports too for ACHA, so they're player funded. So they can't afford to lose anybody. They'll take a 20. I mean, look at your rosters. They're probably 22-man rosters, right? Yeah, it's because you get 22 guys, so your top 5 guys are paying less. Everyone knows how that model works. So there's not an easy way around it other than try to find a way they can make the minimum amount of games and play both. And we do a lot of don't ask, don't tell with the ice coaches in the past, where especially the 2 ACHA coaches are not big roller fans for ASU. So when we've had guys in the past, it's hey, you got a tummy ache this weekend or a big paper due, we got to go to Huntington Beach. That's what you're telling your coach. Big paper due, come play roller this weekend. And most of them, if they love roller, they'll figure out a way to do it. But there's not an easy way out of that other than, again, going back to not having to rely on the ice guys eventually is hopefully the goal.
Absolutely. Those are good closing thoughts. I know you got to run, Nick.
I've got to run to an appointment. Thanks for having me on the call, and I'd love to do it again. Love these kind of talks.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate having your insight.
Thanks, guys.
And, to wrap things up here, we've got Dan, we've got Jaron, we've got Ian. Ian, I know you haven't been able to add your thoughts here. If you have, one thing you want to add, and then we can kind of all add any closing thoughts we have if anybody has anything else worth adding, and we can get out of here.
Yeah, just, obviously a lot of stuff that Nick had added there in regards to working with ACHA coaches and whatnot and having that relationship. I think it comes down to, really building and fostering a lot of the connections that you can to kind of get things to work together in order to make your program last or to benefit your program. But I think when it comes to the initial conversation that we had about divisions and things like that, I think it kind of rings true still about those connections. I think it really is going to have to depend on in making our league better what connections we have between us as coaches and players and PR reps and so on and so forth, all these different kinds of roles that we have, making a concerted effort to bettering our league and being involved in that process. So I think that that our voices are going to be something that's going to be necessary in ordering to push us further forward.
Yeah, I also just want to add too, we have to kind of collectively, as we've mentioned, coming together, and it needs to be a collective, kind of collective movement, real grassroots movement, that, we're going to be the people that make these things happen. And so I think that, something that we're going to have to do is figure out how we can come together and have some talking points that can kind of get discussed and pushed to the various ICE organizations and groups and the community. Now I think it's really worth noting that I'm pretty, as far as I know, the negative stigma with roller hockey is kind of out of the ice hockey circles for the most part, in terms of it's bad for ice hockey. I mean, I think having all these guys playing in the NHL, playing major junior, playing NCAA ice hockey that have roller hockey backgrounds, has kind of dispelled that narrative. And I think everyone's a little bit more aware of kind of the profit-driven motive of ice hockey now, with ice being year-round. There's always ice to fill. There's always a camp that if you don't go to, then your kid Johnny's not making the AAA team or whatever. And so I think that that is a little bit more apparent to a lot of people. And so I think the people that are interested in roller hockey or wanting to play, the kids that play AAA, whether they play AAA ice or they play A-level ice, they know that not going to some camp is not going to be the determinant of whether they make the team that they want to play on, and that ultimately, these guys just have to fill ice. And I mean, that's at least something I see out here in Arizona, and I see it in California. And I'm as far as I know, I mean, it's pretty universal in the States. But I that just means that the obstacle is when coaches are trying to get their kids out and parents still think that their kid has to go to some camp, or they want him to go to some camp instead of playing roller hockey in the summer. You still have to figure out a way to close that gap. It's just a different gap now. Now it's more about convincing kids and parents that it's worth doing, it's worth your time, versus convincing a coach that it's not going to hurt your game or whatever. In terms of the ACHA stuff, I think in the cut list, I mean, hearing you guys talk about that it's upsetting to me. I mean, I think what we have to do is figure out how we can come together and say, look, you need to do this because you're basically denying kids a chance to play hockey in college. If you're not going to give us your cut list, and there's not, we are the best alternative. They can play men's league ice hockey, but for a kid that wants to represent their school and play competitive hockey, there's no other option to play competitive hockey, outside of your ACHA program that you run, and you turn these kids away. Why would you deny them a chance to participate and be a part of, their club sports program, be a part of their school and et cetera? And I think that's kind of where the narrative needs to go. And if we start, making people accountable, I have no problem in terms of, obviously, we could clear it up with the league and whatnot. I don't want to get in any trouble, but I mean, we are, and Coast to Coast is independent of the league. I mean, we have some of their support in some ways, and we're hoping to get more on board in terms of a partnership, but we're always going to be independent. That's something we've talked about with the league amongst ourselves, that's we want that. We want to be independent. We don't want to be like a propaganda outlet or anything like that. And the league is not anything like that. I just want to dispel that, on the spot. These are guys that love the sport. They love what they do. They don't make a lot of money doing it. It's not something where they're making, $100,000 a year, or whatever, doing this. Like, this is something that they do because they love the game, they love roller hockey, they love the sport. They want to, give kids an opportunity to be a part of this. But, personally, I have no problem if, people wanted to submit their relationships with all their ACHA programs. If someone said, hey, we didn't get the cut list, this guy wouldn't give it to us, I'll put the guy on blast on Coast to Coast. I mean, we can tweet at the club sports department. We, and not even just putting him on blast, but if you go to your club sports director and you say, hey, the ice hockey coach, they've got 2 teams. They had 70 kids come to tryouts. They took 50, 25 a team. There's 20 guys that didn't make it, and we're trying to get 51 through 70 on their list to come out and try out for roller hockey. I mean, there's literally no reason why any club sports director would say he doesn't he's allowed to not share that information with you. They're going to get those names and phone numbers. They're going to get that contact info for you, hopefully, if you're, persistent enough about it. And hopefully we can get those guys out to try a roller. I mean, that's ultimately what it comes down to, in my perspective. But, I think like we said, everybody's had a lot to add. I know Andrew, who jumped back on, he's had, some interesting viewpoints that he shared on Twitter, some that were in our last podcast. The full version should be up later tonight, so take a look at that, and you can kind of see some of his views on that. And as we continue our debates throughout the summer, we're going to try to do one of these every week. We're going to talk more about the sport in general, things that the sport, needs to kind of look at as a sport as a whole, or things that we can look at as people that, are involved with the sport to make, whether you want to say make it more appealing or make it more accessible, get roller hockey in the spotlight of people that play hockey. I mean, I think that ultimately those are some of the biggest obstacles are going to be, just dealing with the fact that ice hockey is so big and has such a hold on, hockey players in terms of this kind of American, scholar, it's like an American dream that kind of gets pushed, narrative that gets pushed kind of, but instead it's with scholarships that every kid has a chance to go get a D1 scholarship playing hockey, or every kid's going to go to the NHL. And I mean, there's, 5,000 kids playing junior hockey this year, and there's only, 50 NCAA teams, and each of them have, 10 to 12 scholarships each. So there's probably about 700, NCAA D1 hockey scholarships total, maybe 800. So you figure 200 a year. And, there's 5,000 kids playing junior hockey. Most of them playing pay-to-play. They're paying anywhere from $2,000 to $7,000 a year. And they're all going to end up going and playing more pay-to-play club hockey. And so I think that's where roller hockey is going to, kind of find itself coming to, I think it's going to hit a future boom in the next, 10 years when, as parents start to figure out, it's not worth it for me to spend, a couple $100,000 on my kid over the course of his youth hockey career to go play, more club pay-to-play hockey when he can have as much fun or more fun playing roller hockey, or, it's going to cost less. There are a million kind of different angles to look at it, but I think that's going to be a big opportunity for roller moving forward. And so,
yeah, I don't think roller hockey has been any more accessible than it is now to be able to play. It's the main obstacle in my eyes is getting the word out. And again, that's where a lot of the heavy lifting comes from us.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're at a crossroads, and I think a lot of that is in a good way. One thing that I see, because again, to the ice hockey mystique, because it's one of the main sports, if you will. But at the same time, most of us, not all of us, but most of us that are roller hockey players, were predominantly ice hockey players and started as ice hockey players. So if we as individuals can make that transition, there's no reason that the two sports can't make a transition to be more unified and have more of a communication, whether it be, through your club ice team and your club roller team, or through a college club versus a youth club. I think just there needs to be more common ground and uniformity, and the only way that's going to happen is like you guys said, is by going out and spreading the word, which I know is easier said than done. Nobody likes going and pasting flyers and going door to door and shit like that. But I mean, with a sport like roller hockey, I'm 36. I've played and coached a combination of close to 12 years. So in 12 years that I've been in some way involved with this sport, the opportunity it's there, but it's gonna. And I think the only organization as a whole that could really do it is the NCRHA, because it covers such a broad spectrum, and it's got guys at the a widespread of talent at a good age, and I think there is going to be that boom, Kevin, that you're talking about, and I really hope for it, because I saw it back when I played in the late 90s and early 2000s, and it'd be great to see it again. With the way the less hitting, and the way more concussions are being talked about now. I mean, it's a prime opportunity for roller hockey to, I don't want to sit there and say, come play roller hockey, don't play ice hockey, because you're going to get hurt playing ice. It's not the way I want to go about it, but there's a trend. I mean, look at football. Football's got a completely different mystique about concussions now. You know what I mean? And these contact sports have a different view. And ice hockey is one of those, and I think roller hockey is only going to benefit from that. So I'm anxious and curious to see the way this is going to go.
No, absolutely. I think that's really key, and I mean, I think we all kind of shrug it off a little bit. We all kind of laugh about it a little bit when we think about the fact that like ice hockey in the future might not have hitting, or obviously you look at where the NHL is going 4-on-4, 3-on-3. And it starts becoming less physical and stuff like that. I mean, I think it is kind of funny to think like, oh, we're just all of a sudden going to not play contact sports. But I think that it's also important to think about, in 5-10 years, the information that we have is going to be a lot different. And I don't think it's ever going to stop completely. I don't think you're ever going to take, the physicality out of hockey, whether it's roller or ice or anything. But the way that we look at some of these things, the way that we take, say, hitting from behind, we're going to take these things way more seriously, whether it's in roller, ice, or head-on-head in football. Personally, I've had a friend that had some serious concussion issues that ended up, dying by suicide. And, I don't think that this is obviously we've seen all the fighters in the NHL and things like that. And, I mean, initially, I think when we hear those things, we're just kind of like, all right, yeah, it's a tough sport, whatever, but, like, put your big boy pants on and go to battle. And like, if you get hurt, then you just don't play, you sit out. But, I think a lot of these things are going to become more defining factors in the conversation, moving forward as more of these things come to light. And also, I think that, what you said about the NCRHA is, having to be kind of the leader in terms of this common ground, growing roller, but also just the common ground, uniformity between ice and roller, I think is the key. Because, college roller hockey, you talked about having guys at the right age, you talked about widespread talent, you think about where schools are, the fact that, anyone can start a club roller hockey team, anyone can start a club hockey program at their school, and, it's the branding. I mean, you have schools like Ohio State, Michigan State, Arizona State, the biggest schools that you can think of in sports. Some of them, obviously not as many SEC schools, but when you think about, big sports or big schools and you're thinking about the branding of college, college roller hockey is the only form of roller hockey that has those college brands, that can be kind of associated with its identity. And so, yeah, I think it is, when you're talking about getting involved in a community, being able to say that I'm from the University of Missouri roller hockey team absolutely adds more weight than saying, yeah, I go to the University of Missouri and we have a roller hockey team that, a bunch of guys and we play in the men's league. Being able to say we play, in the National Collegiate Roller Hockey Association and, we're part of the school's team. I think those are the things that help forge those bonds in the community and can ultimately lead us to growing sport.
Trying my best to get those Buccigross retweets, man.
Hey, and that's huge
Right,
too. We're going to talk about, some of those things too in the future. Social media, that'll be probably not an episode, on its own, but it's a huge factor in terms of getting your program noticed. And it's really big for the sport too. I mean, you don't think about it, but when somebody like Buccigross retweets, a Western Michigan roller hockey tweet or retweets the coast-to-coast national rankings, I mean, we were getting tweets from kids saying, "Oh, I didn't even know there was college roller hockey."
Yep.
And it's
Which
one
is exactly the point, you know?
Yep, exactly. And it's one little thing like that that can be, the difference in terms of spreading this and whatnot. We talked about rinks, and I think it's really important too when we talk about this kind of this ice and roller, partnership, if you will, or the common ground. We're gonna have to think about the organizations that we key in on need to be, if possible, either publicly run or like ran by the city. Maybe like nonprofits. But when you think about, like a for-profit ice hockey facility that has a for-profit, travel program run out of it, those programs are going to be a lot less receptive to roller hockey either being, say a summer sport at that facility. So, in Kalamazoo, you're talking about, the arena there, the stadium, and having, roller hockey possibly in the summer, laying down tile. That's a start towards having a nicer facility in the future. Same with, maybe an ice rink in Columbia for Mizzou and stuff like that, where, roller hockey is obviously big enough in Missouri to where you can, and Michigan too, where you can maybe say, hey, like, let's take the ice out of this one facility for the summer. We can play roller in the summer. I think it's going to have to be that route where you don't have that extra obstacle of like the profit-driven, ice hockey coach or facility director that has to figure out how to fill ice year-round. Where you might be able to get, or a city that, say, already has an outdoor rink. I don't know if Kalamazoo has an outdoor rink. I know, Andrew, we talked about Mizzou having, Columbia having an outdoor rink. I mean, those are the kind of things where, the roller hockey club can come together with the city and the community and say, if we can fundraise and figure out a way to get sport court down here, we're going to be able to, to do X, Y, and Z as a club team here. But we're also going to be able to do, X, Y, and Z for the community. Here are the benefits. We're going to be able to start a youth roller hockey program that, I don't even know if there is one in Columbia, but if there is existing, then, we make it better. If there's not, then we build it up. We'll have college kids being part of that, coaching and being part of the development, and you're adding something to the community. All of a sudden, there's your, that and a few fundraisers, and maybe you get, like, whatever, I'm trying to think, like, one of the clubs, the people, like where the old guys, like the veterans, hang out that donate, money to random causes and organizations in the community.
Lions clubs, the Elks club.
There you go. Yeah. That's when you get those guys on board and they say, oh yeah, my kids played hockey, especially in a hockey area where it's like, you can kind of sell it like, look, we're doing something to give kids that might not be able to afford ice hockey an opportunity to play hockey. And we're giving kids that, might not, whatever, have that accessibility. We're making the sport more accessible. We're giving more kids a chance to get involved with hockey. And what can be better than that? And so I think that's something too. And that's how a lot of these rinks outdoor rinks have either been refurbished or have gone tile, is because of kind of efforts like that. So, that's all I really have. We've been talking for a while, and I'm sure, some of you guys want to probably get out of here, but if anybody else wants to, I'll let Jaron kind of go, and then Drew, and then Dan, if you have final thoughts, go ahead, chime them in, and then we'll sign off.
I think the biggest thing that everybody listening to this needs to know is every effort put forth by the members of the club teams everywhere, it moves mountains. For every guy that helps out exponentially makes everything easier. So. And that's pretty much where the groundwork is going to be laid.
Yeah, I think there just needs to be more communication with the players, the associations, the league, the schools and whatnot. There needs to be more communication. I learned a lot today, and thank you for having me on, by the way. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was great to chat with you guys. As an old timer and a coach, it gives me a very good perspective to talk with some of you players from other parts of the country and all that good stuff. So that I appreciate and look forward to continue doing. I think the biggest thing is, I know I said it earlier, and not to be repetitive, but yeah, if we can all, unify ourselves and not just always have the same opinion on everything, but have more of a player's voice, more of a club's voice, a team's voice, if you will, when dealing with some things and some decisions that come down from the league. I think that would be huge, just for the NCRHA as a whole, because that's why we're all here, is to see the NCRHA get better and grow. Scholastically, talking some of the things about local youth teams and travel teams and high school teams, I got a big wave of that going on here in Rhode Island. I've been in talks with some other youth program directors in different parts of the country that have taken a great interest in, feeding me information, what to do, what not to do. So if any of you guys as players, start really going down the road of trying to either establish or revamp a youth hockey program or a roller hockey program in your community, let me know. I'm happy to chime in. I'm happy to help out. I'm happy to direct you in a couple of people that may know a hell of a lot more than you and I that have been doing this, because that's what I'm doing, and it's working here in Little Rhode Island. And if it can work here, it certainly should be able to work for you guys out in bigger parts of the country.
Yep, definitely.
Great points, guys. I just want to thank everybody for being on today. We've had Ian Prescott, host of NCRHA Coast to Coast, Nick Boyarsky, the head coach from Arizona State, Joanne Mafala, who's the head coach of Western Michigan, Andrew Kramer, the director of PR from the University of Missouri, and Dan Leonard, head coach from the University of Rhode Island's roller hockey team. Once again, thanks again, guys, for getting in on this conversation. We want to keep it going. So make sure that you tweet at NCRHA_C2C. You can email us at ncrhacoasttocoast@gmail.com. Get in on the conversation. We're going to keep it going, and these guys will be able to add their 2 cents to the conversation, both through some future podcasts and also through Twitter, social media, and if they want to write something up and add something that we can put on the website, we'll have those opportunities down the road too. So for everybody that has been mentioned so far, I'm Kevin Smith. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys later.
There, guys.
Thank you.